When I got to seminary, I learned that All Saints' Day was not, in fact, a celebration of all of the great New Orleans saints throughout the years. I see Park saying, well, is it not? But I did live in New Orleans for a time, about 6.5 years after Hurricane Katrina, and was blessed to be a part of a couple real jazz funerals. And if you know anything about them, they have a movement to them. So the first part of the movement is a walk towards the burial site for the dead. And there's a band that walks in front. That's called the first line. And as they walk, they play this somber, dirge-type, mournful music. But after the body is put into the ground, they turn around and everyone dances. And the band plays really happy, joyful music. There's a difference between happy and joy, but we don't have time for that. Joy is deeper. And so as we go to the funeral, as you go to the burial site, there's a somberness. But once the body is in the ground, there's this recognition of something deeper and something more eternal that is happening. And that in the midst of our sadness, we can be joyful. And so they do that. People are dancing, even through their tears. And so today, you have these poles, this mourning and joy. And we have that today. We have a baptism. And then we also remember the communion of saints. We remember those who have passed from our earthly life. We have this new birth. And then we have something of an ending. When Jesus, in our gospel, really sums up the whole thing about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Doesn't let us off the hook. But he speaks into these poles, into our earthly life, expanding our consciousness by promising that in God there is more thisness to life because it is infused into this moment is will be. Do you hear him when he says, "Blessed are the poor, for you will be inheriting the kingdom. Blessed are the hungry, for you will be filled. Blessed are the weeping, for you will be laughing again." And so, what he's saying here is that the future can be dragged into the present. Reversing this order of our present reality. He's foretelling something about his own resurrection, which itself was a reversal out of death, life. And so we have these poles, and I want you to imagine a piece of rebar, and on one side is death, and on one side is life. And in the resurrection, Jesus is pulling these poles together so that they are a circle. And then that becomes a spiral that goes down through the generations and up towards the future generations to come. This spiral of life and death caught up in itself. This communion of saints are part of that spiral that we are caught up in. And they pour joy into sorrow and pour life into death. So God's time is called kairos. Our time, we typically call chronos, chronological time. God's time doesn't really work like that, thank goodness. It means that there's more to life than we can possibly comprehend. There's more happening in this moment in each of your lives than you can possibly imagine. But I want you to imagine. Imagine that hovering above you at all times are different feelings and reactions and understandings of the same moment that you are in. And you might be able to pick a moment where you are in deep sadness, and then years later you realize that there was something more than sadness in that moment. There was something like sanctification, that you were being made holy through that sadness. Maybe it was a different emotion. Maybe it was really happy. And then as the years go by, you realize that there was a bittersweetness. There was something more full than the feeling that you had when you were experiencing that. This is what happens when God stretches out time and sends God's self into it. So typically when you're weeping, all you can imagine is pain, and loss will always be defined by weeping. And yet you may see in the future that laughter was coming, or that weeping was made holy and not just about pain and suffering. It may be that little by little, the saints pluck the scales from your eyes and you come to know a deeper truth. And the deeper truth isn't that pain and suffering is necessary, because a lot of times it's not. But it can be sanctified. Maybe sanctified by those on earth who wept with us, who walked with us, or by those who have suffered in the past, or all those who will follow and suffer with us in the future. But it certainly means that we can trust Jesus when he says that our weeping will give way to laughter. But more important than just ending the suffering, the greater gift is this consciousness that transcends the ordinary chronology of our lives and insists that there is more to death than death, and there is more to life than this life. That is what we are all doing here. And when you think about it, there is a defiant quality to this life. There is a rebellious quality to living a life of joy through the pain of being human. Enduring this present reality in the active hope and the promise that God gives us for an eternal reality. This kind of life yanks hope for the future into the present. Not just someday, but now. So recently I was at a reunion for old St. George's Camp counselors up at Shrinemont. This was a couple weeks ago, and it was amazing. A lot of us hadn't seen each other in a long time, but we were all counselors at St. George's Camp. So we were united by this experience that we had. And some folks came from Colorado, London, all over the country. About 70 of us hadn't seen some of these people in 20 years. One person had not been back to the mountain, to Shrinemont, since 1986. And so there we all are, and we had a wonderful weekend. And Saturday night, we had a band, which we call Hoss, which is comprised of former counselors that get together once a year, once every 3 years, to make what we call rock and roll, which is more of an attempt at rock and roll. But we do, the rock does break in, and we had a dance. And right before that dance, one of us got some really bad news, some really scary news about her son, who's 7 years old. He is okay, but we didn't know that that was going to be the case at the time. And this happened right at the beginning of this dance. If you've been there, there's mountains, there's this field, and there's a pavilion up there. There's no one else around. We're surrounded by darkness. The pavilion is lit. Everyone is having fun. We're all in costumes. And I mean like crazy costumes. Like I don't want you to see the pictures of the costumes. Just, wigs and dresses and frilly, glitter everywhere. And yet we start to receive this news, this very scary news about this little boy. But the band kept playing. We might have been tempted to stop dancing. But there was something fierce and rebellious and defiant about the fact that we said no. The appropriate response here is to dance for him and dance for his mother and his father and dance for all those who are terrified, for all those who can't dance right now. We are going to rebelliously, recklessly dance in the face of fear, in the face of something terrifying. And it was beautiful. It was communion. It was God on earth, shaking our wigs, pounding the drums that life continues, that God is here now. The future is present. And we could not have done this on our own. There was something about the shared experience that we had that knitted us together. There's something about the certainty of being part of a communion of saints that stretches backwards and stretches forwards, and yanking that promise of the present into our reality in that moment. We were made holy. And so on this day, as we honor the saints who have passed into what is absolutely a larger life, we remember that this is the circle that we are baptized into. This is the life that we are baptized into. Adelaide, this is the life that you are going to get to live with all of us and with those that come after you. That you will always get to dance in the face of fear and to know that God will always, always be with you. The secret of all saints is that God takes regular people and turns them into mystics and saints. You don't have to live a perfect life. You don't have to do a bunch of miracles. You just have to show up in a true fullness of life. To dance like rebels in the face of fear. And you have to believe the glorious truth that you are already all saints. Amen.